Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let's begin with a gentle question. Close your eyes for a moment, if you feel comfortable, and just ask yourself, what is it that you are truly looking for? Not the small things, not the new car or the promotion, but the deep, quiet hum beneath all you're seeking. What is it? For most of us, it's a feeling of completeness. A sense of being whole, of being okay, no matter what is happening outside. We chase it in relationships, in achievements, in the next big experience. We think, if I can just get this one thing, then I will finally feel full. But that fullness, that wholeness, it always seems to slip through our fingers, doesn't it? It's like trying to hold water in your hand. The tighter you grip, the less you have. Today, we are going to talk about something that sounds like the opposite of what we want. We're going to talk about emptiness. In the West, this word lands with a heavy thud. It sounds like despair, like a void, like a hollow drum with no sound. It sounds like nothingness. And if you believe that is what the great sages and the Buddha himself were pointing to, then you would be right to turn away. Why would anyone seek nothingness? But I want to offer you a different lens today. In the rich and profound philosophy of Buddhism, the word for emptiness is Sunyata. And a more accurate, though still imperfect, translation might be inconceivable, undefinable, or perhaps most beautifully, infinite potential. Imagine you are looking at a clear, blue sky. From one perspective, we could say it's empty. There are no clouds, no birds, no planes. It's just blue. But is it truly empty? No. It is full of the potential for clouds to form. It is the very space that allows the sun to shine, the rain to fall, and the birds to fly. Without that open, empty sky, nothing could happen. The sky is not a barrier, it is the enabler. It is the canvas upon which the entire drama of the day is painted. Emptiness, in the Buddhist sense, is like that sky. It is the fundamental ground of your being. It is not that nothing exists. Things exist, vibrantly. The cup of tea in your hand exists, the sound of my voice exists, the thoughts in your mind exist. But the Buddhist masters, for over 2,500 years, have been pointing to a deeper truth: these things do not exist in the way we think they do. They don't have a solid, permanent, independent existence. They are like clouds in the sky of your awareness, constantly changing, appearing, and dissolving back into the space from which they came. Your mind, in its essence, is this same kind of space. It is empty of any permanent, fixed you. And because it is empty, it is full of possibility. Because your mind is not stuck as one thing, it can experience a million things. It can feel joy one moment and sadness the next. It can learn a new language, fall in love, grieve a loss, and feel the warmth of the sun on its skin. All of this is possible only because the mind itself is not a fixed object, but an open, aware, and empty space. This is the journey we will take together today. We will explore this most misunderstood concept, not as a dry philosophy, but as a living, breathing experience that can transform your relationship with fear, with yourself, and with the entire world. We will peel back the layers of the mind, not to find a void at the center, but to discover the infinite, creative, and peaceful space that you truly are. Let's bring this down from the philosophical clouds and into the living room of your psychology. Why does this matter to you, right now, in your life? Modern psychology talks a lot about the ego. It's a term we use casually. We say, he has such a big ego, meaning he's arrogant. Or we talk about ego death as something that happens on a psychedelic trip. But what is the ego, really, from a psychological and Buddhist perspective? The ego is the story you tell yourself about who you are. It's a mental construct, a collection of memories, beliefs, and conditioned patterns. It's the voice in your head that says, I am a kind person, or I am not good at math, or I am the one who was hurt in that relationship, or I am someone who needs to be successful to be loved. This collection of thoughts feels incredibly solid, doesn't it? It feels like the very core of your being. We spend our entire lives defending this self. We get offended when someone challenges our story. We feel anxious when the story is threatened. When we might fail, be rejected, or be proven wrong. The entire structure of our psychological suffering is built upon the effort to protect and prop up this solid, separate self. But here is the liberating insight from Buddhist psychology: this solid self is a ghost. It's an illusion. It's not that you don't exist. You exist. But the you that you take yourself to be, that fixed, permanent character, is a product of thought. It's a concept, not a reality. Let's do a little experiment together. Just for a moment, try to find this you that you are so worried about. Close your eyes. Can you find yourself in your big toe? Can you find it in your left elbow? Maybe it's in your head, behind your eyes. Is it a thought? If it's a thought, then thoughts come and go. Which one is the real you? Is it the thought, I'm tired, or the thought, I'm happy? They are different, aren't they? They are just visitors passing through. What you will find, if you look honestly, is that you cannot locate a solid, fixed self anywhere. You find a body, you find sensations, you find a constant stream of thoughts and emotions. But the owner of all these things, the permanent I behind it all, is nowhere to be found. It's like looking for a wave in the ocean. You can see the shape, the movement, the energy, but you cannot find a wave that is separate from the ocean itself. This is the first taste of emptiness. The self is empty of inherent, independent existence. It is a process, not a thing. And realizing this isn't a cause for despair, it is the end of a lifelong war. If there is no solid self to defend, then who is there to be offended? Who is there to be anxious? Who is there to be afraid of death? The fear begins to lose its footing, because its very foundation, the belief in a solid, separate self, is seen to be made of nothing but thought. I'm reminded of a story from the early days of my own exploration. A man once came to a teacher I knew. He was a very successful architect, a man who designed massive, solid structures, buildings that would stand for 100 years. He came to the teacher with a deep sense of unease. He said, I feel like I'm falling apart. I've built this entire life, this reputation, this family, and it all feels like a house of cards. I feel hollow inside, and I'm terrified that one day, everyone will see that there's nothing really there. The teacher listened patiently. He didn't offer him a sutra to chant or a koan to solve. Instead, he asked the architect to stand up and walk to the wall where the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows. Look at your shadow, the teacher said. The architect looked at his own distorted, long shadow on the white wall. Now, said the teacher, punch it. The architect was confused. Punch my shadow? What for? Just do it, the teacher insisted. show your shadow who's boss. It's been causing you so much trouble. Punch it. The architect, humoring the teacher, made a fist and took a swing at the shadow on the wall. His fist hit the solid wall with a thud, and he winced in pain. Ouch! Why did you make me do that? He exclaimed, shaking his hand. The teacher smiled gently. Your whole life, you have been trying to fight, to protect, and to solidify something that is no more real than that shadow. Your idea of yourself, the one you're so afraid of losing, it's a projection. It has no substance. You can't punch a shadow, and you can't lose a shadow. When the light changes, the shadow changes. When you move, it moves. It's not a thing. It's just a consequence of light and your form. Your feeling of being hollow isn't a problem to be solved. It's the truth trying to dawn on you. The structure you've built, the house of cards, isn't you. It's just the shadow you cast in the world. And the feeling of hollowness you're experiencing? That's not an empty void. That's the space where the solid self used to be. You're not falling apart. You're just beginning to see that there was nothing solid there to begin with. The pain you feel is from punching the wall, not from losing your shadow. The architect stood there, looking at his hand, then back at his shadow. In that moment, the paradigm shifted. He wasn't trying to get rid of his ego or destroy his shadow. He simply stopped believing it was something he had to fight for. This is the beginning of the path. We stop trying to build a better, stronger shadow, and we start to investigate the nature of the light and the form that casts it. If this initial exploration is resonating with you, if it's offering a new way to look at the old patterns of fear and anxiety in your life, I invite you to become a part of our community here at Monk's Temple. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel, you're making a commitment to yourself. You're saying, yes, I am ready to look deeper. I am ready to understand the nature of my own mind. When you subscribe, you ensure that these gentle reminders and profound teachings find their way back to you, creating a consistent space for reflection in your busy life. Just look for the subscribe button below, and join us on this journey inward. Now, let's move from the psychological to the cosmic. One of the most fascinating bridges between ancient Buddhist philosophy and modern science is the way they both describe the fundamental nature of reality. Buddhism speaks of emptiness, Sunyata. Modern physics speaks of the quantum vacuum or the zero-point field. When physicists look at the world at its smallest scale, they don't find little billiard balls of matter. They find a frothing, churning sea of energy. Particles pop into existence and then disappear again in a fraction of a second. An electron isn't a thing with a fixed location, it's more like a cloud of probability, existing in multiple places at once until it is observed. The solid, material world we experience with our senses is, at its most fundamental level, mostly empty space and vibrating energy. This quantum vacuum isn't empty in the sense of being a void. It's actually a state of infinite potential. It's the ground state, the most fundamental field from which all particles and forces arise. It's empty of things, but it is full of the potential for things. Without this potent emptiness, nothing physical could exist. This is a powerful metaphor for your own mind. Your consciousness is like this quantum vacuum. It is not a thing. It has no shape, no color, no size. You cannot find it anywhere in your brain. A surgeon can open up your skull and see neurons and synapses, but they will never find a thought, a feeling, or the experience of I. Why? Because consciousness, in its essence, is a field of potential. It is empty of any fixed content, but it is the very ground from which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations arise. Think of it this way. Your mind is like a clear mountain lake. The lake itself is the water, your awareness. The waves on the surface are your thoughts. The different colors reflected in the water are your emotions. The depth and the coolness are your deeper states of being. The water is never separate from its waves or its reflections, but it is not defined by them. A wave rises, it has its moment, and then it dissolves back into the water. Where did it go? It didn't go anywhere. It was always water. It just changed form. Emptiness is that water. It is the nature of your mind. Thoughts, like waves, are not a problem. They are the creative play of the mind. The suffering begins when we mistake the wave for the whole ocean. When we cling to a particular wave, thinking, "This is who I am, this joy must stay forever," we are setting ourselves up for pain because all waves must eventually subside. When we push away another wave, thinking, "This anger is not me, it must be destroyed," we are fighting our own nature. The practice is not to get rid of the waves. It's to realize you are the lake. To rest as the vast, cool, deep water that is perfectly capable of hosting any wave that comes, without being disturbed by it. The lake doesn't prefer calm over storm, it simply holds both. This is the peace of emptiness. It's not a dead, flat calm. It's a vibrant, alive peace that includes all experiences without being attached to any of them. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was a high-powered executive in a tech firm. Her life was a never-ending stream of emails, meetings, deadlines, and decisions. Her mind was her inbox, constantly full, constantly demanding a response. She came to a meditation retreat out of sheer burnout. She said, "My mind is like a computer with 100 tabs open, and they're all frozen. I just need to shut it down for a while." On the third day, after hours of sitting and watching her breath, she had a moment of clarity. She later described it to me. She said, "For the first time in my adult life, my mind went quiet. It wasn't that I forced the thoughts to stop. It was like I finally stopped adding more tabs, and one by one, they just closed themselves. And in the space that was left, I realized something profound. I had always thought I was the person managing the inbox. I thought my identity was tied to my ability to process, to respond, to control the flow. But in that moment of silence, there was no inbox. And there was no manager. There was just space. A clear, bright, alert space. She paused, a look of wonder still on her face. And I wasn't scared. It was the most peaceful I've ever felt. I realized that all my life, the stress wasn't coming from the emails. It was coming from the belief that I was the one who had to answer them. When that me disappeared for a moment, the emails didn't matter anymore. They were just phenomena. Like birds flying across a big, empty sky. Sarah had touched emptiness. She didn't become a void. She didn't cease to exist. She simply stopped over-identifying with the busy, thinking, problem-solving part of her mind. She tasted the background awareness that had been there all along, unnoticed because she was so focused on the foreground noise. This is the gift of mindfulness. It's not about emptying the mind by force, but about shifting your identity from the content to the context, from the movie to the screen. In Buddhist psychology, we can speak of the mind having different dimensions. To make this practical, let's look at 3 distinct states, 3 ways of experiencing. The first state is the one we all know intimately. It's the state where the mind is full of content. This is the world of thoughts, memories, plans, fantasies, judgments, and sensations. It's the constant inner monologue. I need to get milk. Why did she say that? I'm worried about that meeting. I'm hungry. This is boring. I like this song. This is the mind as a busy marketplace, full of noise, sellers, buyers, and chaos. We spend almost our entire lives here, completely identified with one voice in the crowd, thinking that voice is us. This is the state of the ego, the solid self, constantly reacting to and trying to manage its content. Then, there is a second state. This is the state of meditation. It is not that you have successfully kicked everyone out of the marketplace. It's that you have stepped back and found a quiet balcony overlooking the square. You can still see the activity, hear the noise, but you are no longer in the middle of it, being jostled around. You are simply observing. The content is still there, but your relationship to it has changed. Your consciousness is now aware of the content, but not completely lost in it. This is the beginning of freedom. This is contentless consciousness. Not that there is no content, but that you are no longer fused with it. You are the witness, not the participant. In this state, you can watch a thought arise, you can watch it stay for a while, and you can watch it dissolve. You don't have to grab it, argue with it, or follow it. You just let it be. This is a revolutionary shift. In our normal state, we are like a person who is their thoughts. In this second state, we are the one having thoughts. There is a space between you and your experience. And in that space, there is peace. The Buddha described this as the mind becoming like a clear, still pool of water. The fish, thoughts, may still swim in it, but you can see them clearly from the bank. You are not down there in the murky water, being bumped into by the fish. I once met a nature photographer named David. His specialty was photographing waterfalls. He would travel all over the world, setting up his large format camera, waiting for the perfect light. He told me about a profound experience he had one morning in a remote part of Iceland. He had hiked for hours to reach a massive, powerful waterfall. He set up his tripod, composed his shot, and waited for the sunrise. As the first rays of light hit the water, it was breathtaking. He started taking photos, but something was different. He wasn't just thinking about aperture and shutter speed. He was completely absorbed. I was so focused, he told me, that after a while, I stopped being David the photographer taking a picture of a waterfall. There was just the seeing. The roaring sound of the water wasn't a sound anymore, it was just a vibration that filled everything, including me. I couldn't find the boundary between the sound and my own body. I couldn't find the boundary between the light hitting the water and the light entering my eyes. There was just one, seamless, roaring, luminous event happening. And in the middle of it all, there was no me to be found. There was just the experience. He took a deep breath, remembering it. After what felt like a long time, a thought popped in, this is the best photo I've ever taken. And as soon as that thought appeared, the magic shattered. I was back. I was David, standing in the cold, behind a camera. But for those few minutes, I wasn't. I was part of the waterfall. David had stumbled into a state of non-duality. The separation between subject, the observer, and object, the waterfall, had dissolved. This is a glimpse beyond even the second state. In the second state, David would have been the calm observer on the balcony, watching the waterfall. In this third state, the balcony, the observer, and the waterfall all collapsed into one unified experience. This is what is meant by the third state, sometimes called samadhi or non-dual awareness. The content, the waterfall, and the consciousness, the observer, are seen to be not two separate things, but one single, luminous reality. The mind has turned back on itself and realized its own nature. So, what is this third state that Buddha pointed to as the ultimate? We've talked about the mind full of content, state 1. We've talked about the mind aware of its content, state 2. Now we arrive at the mind recognizing itself. In the second state, there is still a subtle duality. There is the witness and the thing witnessed. There is the sky and the clouds. It's a vast improvement over being lost in the clouds, but there is still a sense of separation. The witness feels separate from the thoughts it watches. But if you rest in that witnessing state long enough, a strange thing begins to happen. The witness itself starts to become unstable. You begin to look for the one who is watching. Who is this witness? Is it another, more subtle thought? Is it a feeling? You turn your attention back on itself. You ask, what is it that is aware of this thought? What is the nature of awareness itself? And when you look for the witness, you cannot find it. You find awareness of the breath, awareness of a sound, awareness of a thought. But you cannot find a separate thing that is doing the aware-ng. It's like a light illuminating a room. You can see everything the light touches, but you cannot see the light itself. The light is the very means by which you see everything else, but it is invisible to itself. In this moment, the seeker and the sought collapse into one. You realize you are not the witness of awareness, you are awareness. The screen doesn't just hold the movie, the screen is the capacity to hold the movie. There is no longer an observer standing apart from experience. There is just experiencing. There is no longer a self having a thought. There is just the thought, arising and passing away in the vast, empty, aware space that you are. This is the emptiness the Buddha spoke of. It's not a blank nothing. It is the utterly simple, utterly obvious, and utterly indescribable nature of your own being. It is pure potentiality. It is the suchness of reality, before you label it good or bad, self or other, inner or outer. It is the taste of pure existence. And it is, as the masters have promised for millennia, the end of suffering. Because suffering requires a sufferer. And in this state, the sufferer is nowhere to be found. Let me share a story about a concert pianist named Dilara. She was a brilliant musician, but she suffered from crippling stage fright. The fear wasn't just nervousness, it was a paralyzing terror that would begin days before a performance. She described it as a dark cloud that would descend on her, whispering, "You're going to fail. You're going to forget the notes. Everyone will see you're a fraud." She came to a teacher, desperate for help. The teacher, a wise woman, didn't give her breathing exercises or positive affirmations. Instead, she asked, "When this fear arises, where do you feel it in your body?" Ilara thought about it. In my chest. It feels tight, like a knot. And my stomach churns. Good, the teacher said. Now, next time you feel it, I don't want you to try to make it go away. I want you to do the opposite. I want you to sit with it, not as Ilara who is afraid, but simply as a space that is hosting this sensation called fear. Just be the room in which this knot is appearing. Don't try to untie it. Don't try to kick it out. Just let it be there. At her next performance, the fear came, as expected. But this time, she did as the teacher instructed. Instead of becoming the fear, she became the space for it. She felt the tightness in her chest, but she also felt the awareness that was noticing the tightness. That awareness felt open, vast, and completely unbothered by the sensation. The knot was there, but it was floating in a vast ocean of peace. She sat down at the piano. The fear was still there, a trembling in her hands. But the vast space was there too. She began to play. And for the first time, the fear didn't own her. It was just another sensation, another flavor in the overall experience. The music poured through her, and the fear was just a background texture, like the low, dark notes in a beautiful chord. After the performance, she realized something. The fear hadn't destroyed her. It couldn't touch the awareness that was her true nature. She hadn't gotten rid of the fear. She had simply stopped being afraid of it. She had realized that the fear was a guest in the house of her being, not the owner. And the house, the awareness itself, was perfectly safe, perfectly still, no matter who came to visit. This brings us back to one of the most common and terrifying misunderstandings on the spiritual path. When people first hear that the self is empty, that all things are empty, a primal fear can arise. It's the fear of dissolution. The fear that if I am truly empty, I will fall apart, I will cease to exist, I will be annihilated. It's the fear the architect felt when he looked at his shadow, the fear that there is nothing holding us up, and we will fall into an abyss. This is the fear of confusing emptiness with the void. The void is a concept of nothingness. It's an absence. Emptiness, true Sunyata, is not an absence. It is a presence. It is the presence of infinite potential. Imagine you are standing on what you believe to be solid ground. Then someone tells you, this ground you're standing on, it's not solid. It's mostly empty space. The atoms in your feet and the atoms in the ground are 99.999% empty space. The mind can interpret this as, oh no. I'm going to fall through. There's nothing there. But the truth is, you don't fall through. You are held. The emptiness of the atoms isn't a lack of support. It's the very nature of the electromagnetic force that creates the sensation of solidity. The emptiness is what allows the solidity to occur. Without that space, there would be no interaction, no support, no ground. The same is true for your being. When you realize the self is empty, you might feel like you're going to fall apart. But the truth is, you are finally discovering what has been holding you up all along. The solid self you thought you were was a burden, a heavy rock you were carrying. Realizing it's empty is like realizing you can put the rock down. You don't fall. You just feel lighter. The student in the old story who was terrified of falling through the floor, he was still thinking of emptiness as a property of things, the floor, the house, the earth. He hadn't yet applied it to himself. The moment the teacher asked, who would fall, the whole framework shifted. If the floor is empty of a solid, independent self, and the person is also empty of a solid, independent self, then the question of falling becomes meaningless. There is no separate faller and no separate ground to fall through. There is just the single, luminous, empty process of reality, unfolding perfectly. The fear dissolved not because he found a more solid floor, but because he realized he was the floor, he was the ground of being itself. Let me tell you about Robert, an accountant. His world was built on columns, numbers, and balances. Everything had to add up. Everything had a place. He came to a retreat because his wife had left him, and for the first time in his life, his internal ledger didn't balance. He was in a state of profound grief and confusion. He felt like his whole life's work, the perfectly organized spreadsheet of his existence, had been deleted. During a meditation session, he was instructed to simply watch his breath. But the grief was overwhelming. It felt like a black hole in his chest. The teacher noticed his struggle and whispered to him, instead of watching your breath, just let your awareness sink into that grief. Don't think about it. Just feel it as a physical sensation. And as you feel it, ask yourself, who is feeling this? Robert did as he was told. He stopped trying to escape the grief and plunged right into it. He felt the crushing weight, the hollowness. And then he asked the question, who is feeling this? And in that moment, something cracked. He later described it as the grief being a dark room, and the question was like turning on the light. The grief was still there, but he could see that he, the feeler of the grief, was not made of the same stuff. The grief was a heavy, dark object in the room. But the room itself, his awareness, was light, clear, and completely undamaged by the object in it. It was like I was a ledger keeper who spent his whole life obsessing over the numbers in the ledger, thinking he was the ledger, he told me. And then I suddenly realized I was the one looking at the ledger. The numbers could be in perfect order or a complete mess, but I, the observer, was untouched. The grief was just a big, red, negative number in my ledger. But I wasn't the ledger anymore. I was the one reading it. Robert had moved from state 1, lost in the grief, to state 2, witnessing the grief. And in that shift, the grief lost its power to define him. It was still there, but it was no longer him. This is the beginning of healing, not by getting rid of the pain, but by realizing you are not the pain. So far, we've talked about emptiness as a path to peace, as an end to suffering. But it's equally important to understand emptiness as the source of all positive, creative, and loving expression. It is not a dead end, it is the fountainhead. Think about creativity. Where do new ideas come from? They don't come from more thinking. They come from a gap in thinking. Every artist, writer, musician, and scientist knows this. You struggle with a problem, you turn it over in your mind, you hit a wall. You give up, you go for a walk, you take a shower, and suddenly, ping. The solution appears, seemingly out of nowhere. It came from the gap. It came from the empty, receptive space you entered when you stopped trying so hard. The emptiness of your mind allowed the idea to be born. The same is true for love. When we love someone from the level of the solid self, it's often conditional, fearful, and needy. I love you because you make me feel good. I love you because you fill a void in me. I need you to love me back, or I will be hurt. This is not love, it's a transaction. It's two needy selves trying to use each other for comfort. But when you have tasted your own emptiness, a different kind of love becomes possible. When you realize you are already whole, already complete, you no longer need anything from anyone else. You don't love to get something back. You love simply because that is your nature. Your love flows out of your fullness, your emptiness, like light from the sun. It asks for nothing in return. It doesn't depend on the other person behaving in a certain way. It is unconditional. This is the love the Buddha spoke of, the boundless, immeasurable love, compassion, and joy that arise naturally from a mind that knows its own true nature. It's the love that holds all beings with the same impartial warmth that the sun shines on everyone. It's not a love that clings, it's a love that frees. Because you are empty of a self that needs to possess, you can truly appreciate the other in their own beautiful, empty, and ever-changing dance. Let me share a simple, everyday story. A young mother, Maya, was at her wit's end. Her toddler had just spilled a full glass of milk all over the kitchen floor she had just mopped. Her immediate reaction was a surge of anger. The solid self, Maya, the good homemaker, felt attacked. Look at this mess. Now I have to clean it all over again. Why is he so careless? Her mind was full of content, and she was ready to explode. But in that moment, she took a breath. Instead of reacting, she just paused. She looked at her son. He wasn't being malicious. He was looking at the spreading white puddle with a mixture of surprise and fear, his lower lip starting to tremble because he could sense his mother's anger. In that pause, the gap appeared. The story of the good homemaker and the careless child faded into the background. What was left? Just awareness. Just this moment. She saw her son's fear, and her heart softened. She didn't get angry. She knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said gently, "Oh dear, the milk spilled. That's okay. It was an accident." And instead of just cleaning it up herself, she got some paper towels and showed him how to help. In that moment, her response came not from her conditioned, angry self, but from the empty, aware, and loving space of her true nature. The situation was the same. The spilled milk was the same. But the reaction was completely different. The emptiness within her allowed a creative, compassionate, and appropriate response to arise, rather than a habitual, reactive one. This is the practical magic of emptiness. It's not just for monks in caves, it's for mothers in kitchens, dealing with spilled milk. It's the space between stimulus and response, where our freedom lies. This brings us to the heart of how we live our lives. For most of us, life is a series of reactions. Someone says something, and we react with hurt or anger. A situation arises, and we react with anxiety or hope. Our lives are like a pinball machine, constantly being bounced around by external events. We are not living, we are merely reacting. And this reactivity is driven by the solid self, which is constantly trying to protect itself, get what it wants, and avoid what it doesn't want. When you begin to rest in the awareness of emptiness, your relationship to life shifts from reaction to action. Action is different. Action is a spontaneous, creative, an appropriate response to the present moment, uncolored by the fears and desires of the ego. Action comes from the whole of your being, reaction comes from a fragmented part of it. Think of it like a martial artist. When you first learn a martial art, your movements are clumsy and reactionary. Someone punches, and you flinch. You try to remember the block, but you're too slow. You are reacting from a place of fear and a solid self that wants to protect itself. But after years of practice, something changes. The moves become part of you. When an attack comes, the body moves perfectly without the mind having to think. There is no me who is blocking. There is just the block. The action is a spontaneous expression of the moment, arising from a mind that is empty of hesitation, empty of fear, empty of a separate self. The martial artist calls this mushin, or no mind. It's the same as Buddhist emptiness in action. In your life, living from emptiness looks like this: you are faced with a difficult decision. The old way would be to obsess over it, to weigh pros and cons endlessly, driven by fear of making the wrong choice. Living from emptiness, you gather the necessary information, and then you let it go. You create a gap. You don't force an answer. You trust the silence. And then, when the time comes to act, the right decision arises naturally, not from a panicked mind, but from a calm, clear, intuitive knowing. It feels right in your whole body, not just in your thinking head. This is action. This is freedom. Now, a very important point needs to be made. If all of this is true, if we are already empty, already aware, already whole, then why do we need to practice? Why meditate? Why do all this work? This is the great paradox of the path. We practice not to become something we are not, but to uncover what we already are. It's like polishing a dusty mirror. The mirror's ability to reflect is never lost. It is always there, perfect and clear. It's just covered with dust. The practice of meditation is not creating the reflection, it is simply wiping away the dust so the original, pristine nature of the mirror can be seen. The dust is our conditioning, our habits, our deeply held beliefs in a solid self. We don't get rid of the dust by fighting it. You can't scrub a mirror clean with aggression. You have to be gentle. You simply bring awareness to the dust. You see it for what it is, just dust, just a collection of passing thoughts and emotions. And in the light of that awareness, the dust begins to loosen and fall away on its own. So, the practice is a gentle, persistent effort to remember. To remember to come back to the present moment. To remember to rest as awareness. To remember to ask, who is experiencing this? It's not about achieving a goal in the future. It's about recognizing what is true right now. It's like swimming. You can struggle and thrash, trying to reach the shore. Or you can relax and realize you are already in the water, and the water is holding you up. The effort is not in the struggle, the effort is in the remembering to relax. We meditate not to get high or to have special experiences. Special experiences come and go. They are just more clouds in the sky. We meditate to become familiar with the sky itself, the unchanging, ever-present background. We do it so that, little by little, our default mode of being shifts from being lost in the movie to resting as the screen. This is a gradual process. It requires patience, kindness, and a good dose of humor for when we inevitably forget and get lost again. A sculptor named Kenji was famous for his exquisite carvings of animals. He could take a block of wood and release the form that was sleeping inside it. But he went through a period of terrible creative block. He would sit in front of a beautiful piece of cherry wood, chisel in hand, and nothing would come. He felt empty, but it was a frightening, barren emptiness. He felt like a fraud. The solid self of Kenji, the great sculptor, was crumbling. In his despair, he went to visit an old Zen master he knew. He poured out his story of creative paralysis and fear. The master listened, then said, "Come, let's take a walk in the garden." They walked in silence past the mossy stones and the koi pond. Finally, the master stopped in front of a large, rough, unhewn boulder. "What do you see?" the master asked. Kenji looked at the boulder. "I see a rock. A big, ugly, useless rock." The master smiled. "I see the most perfect mountain. I see the strength of the earth. I see a home for the moss and a resting place for the rain. It is complete, exactly as it is. It needs nothing. It is not waiting to become a statue." He turned to Kenji. "You have forgotten the difference between the wood in your studio and the wood in the forest. The wood in the forest is perfectly itself, a tree, living, dying, returning to the earth. It is empty of the need to be anything else. The wood in your studio is the same wood, but you have imposed a story upon it. You have decided it must become a statue, and that you are the one who must force it to become one. You are struggling with the wood because you are struggling with yourself. You look at yourself and see a useless rock, not the perfect, complete, empty being that you are. Put down your chisel. Go sit in the forest. Become the wood, not the sculptor. Let the emptiness fill you, not with ideas of what you should make, but with the simple joy of being." Kenji took the master's advice. He spent days just sitting in the forest, not trying to think of new sculptures, just being with the trees. And slowly, the barren, frightening emptiness he felt transformed. It became a fertile, alive, peaceful emptiness. A few weeks later, he walked into his studio, picked up a piece of wood, and without a single thought, his hands began to move. The sculpture that emerged was unlike anything he had made before. It was simpler, more alive, as if the wood itself had carved its own story. Kenji had stopped trying to be a sculptor and had remembered how to simply be. And from that being, the doing flowed effortlessly. So, what is the result of this gradual recognition? What is the fruit of understanding emptiness? It is a life of profound and radical fearlessness. Think about it. All fear is ultimately rooted in the protection of a self. We fear for our physical safety, our emotional well-being, our reputation, our loved ones. All of these fears are branches of one root, the belief that there is a me that can be harmed, diminished, or destroyed. When you realize, through direct experience, that this me is a phantom, a collection of thoughts and sensations with no permanent, solid core, what is left to protect? If you are no longer a wave, but the entire ocean, can a wave be destroyed? The ocean can manifest as a wave, and the wave can subside back into the ocean. It was never born, and it never dies. It was always just the ocean, playing. This doesn't mean you become reckless or that you lose your natural instinct for self-preservation. You will still get out of the way of a speeding bus. The body has its own wisdom. But the existential terror, the deep-seated anxiety that underlies so much of human life, begins to evaporate. You are no longer afraid of being hurt because you realize the one who could be hurt is not who you really are. You are no longer afraid of failure, because failure is just a label applied to a temporary configuration of events, none of which can touch your true nature. You are no longer afraid of death, because the one who dies was never truly born. It was just a temporary appearance in the vast, empty, aware space of what you are. This is the safety the Buddha promised. It's not a safety that comes from building thicker walls or bigger bank accounts. It's a safety that comes from realizing there is no one inside the walls to protect. It is the ultimate security, because it is not based on conditions. It is your very nature. Let me tell you about a man named Arthur. He was the CEO of a large corporation. His entire identity was wrapped up in his company. He was a powerful, decisive leader, respected and feared. Then, a hostile takeover bid was launched. For months, his life was a living nightmare. He fought desperately, working 20-hour days, consumed by anxiety and rage. He saw lawyers, bankers, and board members as enemies. He was fighting for his life, or so he believed. In the end, he lost. The takeover succeeded, and he was forced out of the company he had built. He was devastated. He fell into a deep depression. He felt he had been annihilated. The solid self of Arthur, the powerful CEO, was dead. A friend convinced him to go on a meditation retreat, not to solve anything, but just to get away. In the silence of the retreat, he sat with his devastation. He felt the shame, the anger, the sense of utter worthlessness. He watched these feelings, day after day. And slowly, something shifted. He began to notice that the feelings, as intense as they were just visitors. They would arise, peak, and eventually subside. But the awareness that was watching them, that remained constant. It wasn't ashamed. It wasn't angry. It was just quietly, peacefully aware. One afternoon, sitting under a large oak tree, he had a profound realization. He later told me, I had spent my whole life thinking I was the CEO of me Incorporated. I thought my job was to manage my life, protect my assets, and grow my reputation. When the company was taken from me, I thought I had died. But sitting under that tree, I realized I was never the CEO. I was the sky. The CEO was just a cloud that passed through. A big, dark, storm cloud, for sure. But just a cloud. And the sky? The sky was completely unaffected. The cloud came and went, and the sky just stayed there, open and free. For Arthur, this wasn't just a nice idea. It was a visceral, life-altering experience. The fear of failure, the terror of losing his status, the anxiety about the future, it all fell away. He didn't become passive or apathetic. He went on to do other things, to start new projects, but he did them from a completely different place. He was no longer doing them to prop up a fragile self. He was doing them for the sheer joy of creation. He had touched his own emptiness, and in doing so, he had become invincible. Not in the sense of being able to win every fight, but in the sense of having no self left to lose. And so, we return to where we began. We return to the open sky. We started this journey thinking emptiness might be a void, a nothingness to be feared. We have seen, through psychological insight, ancient Buddhist wisdom, and modern stories, that it is quite the opposite. Emptiness is not an absence of things. It is the presence of all possibility. It is the silence that makes music possible. It is the space that makes form possible. It is the awareness that makes all experience possible. The solid self you've been trying so hard to protect and build, that was the source of your suffering. It was a mirage, a shadow, a knot of thoughts and fears. The peace you've been seeking outside yourself, in achievements, relationships, and possessions, was never out there. It was always here, hiding in plain sight, as the very nature of your own being. It was the emptiness you were afraid to look at. To realize emptiness is not to become a zombie, devoid of feeling or personality. It is to become fully alive. It is to feel joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, but without being possessed by them. It is to act in the world with clarity and compassion, but without the desperate need for a specific outcome. It is to love deeply and freely, without the chains of attachment and fear. It is to look at death and see it not as an end, but as another beautiful and mysterious change in the ever-changing dance of the universe. The Buddha's final words were, "All composite things decay. Strive on with diligence. All things that are put together, your body, your thoughts, your identity, this world, will eventually come apart. That is their nature. But what you are, in your essence, was never put together. It was never born and will never die. It is the empty, aware, boundless space in which all things appear and into which all things dissolve. This is your true home. This is the temple that was never built and can never be destroyed. The path is simply the art of returning, again and again, to this open, empty, and infinitely loving sky of your own being. Not by becoming something new, but by recognizing what you have always been. So, as we come to the end of our time together, I invite you to just sit quietly for a few moments. Let go of all the words, all the concepts, all the stories. They are just fingers pointing at the moon. Don't look at the finger, look at the moon. Feel the simple, undeniable fact of your own awareness. Notice how it is effortlessly present. It requires no effort. It is just here. Notice how it holds every sound, every sensation, every thought, like the sky holds the clouds. It is never stained or damaged by anything that passes through it. Can you sense that this awareness is not a thing? It has no shape, no color, no location. It is empty. And yet, it is vibrantly, luminously aware. It is this emptiness that is reading these words right now. It is this emptiness that is listening to the silence between the words. It is this emptiness that is you. Rest here, for just a moment, in the simple, open, aware space of your own being. There's nowhere to go. Nothing to do. No one to be. Just this. Thank you for joining me on this journey today at Monk's Temple. May you carry this sense of open, peaceful awareness with you into every moment of your life. May you find the courage to rest in your own true nature, the fearless, boundless, and empty sky that you are. Until we meet again, be well, be kind, and be still.